Big Mac, number 72, Larry Avery, number 25, and Richard Ritchie, number 16, the winningest quarterback in the history of college football. He won 36 games in a row. Every game he started in college, he won. That is a world record in college football. Nobody's ever topped that. Richard Ritchie, the little general from Mineral Wells. Larry Hurt, number 85. The gentleman Larry Hurt, nicest guy ever off the field. On the field, he's an attack dog. A great name for a defensive end, Larry Hurt. He will hurt you. A fine Christian gentleman. He married Jan Montford, who was a cheerleader and a tennis player. Great people. I'm still friends with them today. 45 years later, I talked to him on Facebook yesterday. Mark Disdar is Mark Disdar, my buddy Diz, number 60, my high school number. Mark Disdar is a rock. All-American, academic All-American. Started as a freshman. Ultimately, platted 73 subdivisions in his career. Working with the dirt, drawing it all out, putting all the infrastructure in, building the houses, selling them all. That's serious cha-ching. My buddy Diz. I still talk to him regularly. I text him about once a month to see what's going on.
So what we felt was the best way to start was by bringing 2 amateur teams and letting them play for this European Cup. Next year we'll do the same, starting the season again, and most likely with the opening game possibly in Paris or somewhere else. And again, maybe with a few more teams competing. We want to introduce the European public and get the American public used to the idea that American football is in Europe and it's here to stay. So that in a few years, when the sport has become more popular and there is a fan group, and it can become professional without the slightest flaw. And you think you can foresee a Berlin team with German players, maybe with an American quarterback or an American runner. But believe me, you're going to see out there, they're going to be yelling and swearing at each other in German, not English.
Fans tossing a football, that's particularly poignant because they're little kids. They're like 8 or 10 years old, and they're fascinated by American football. And the idea is they want that demographic, right? Because they're going to grow up and buy tickets to the future NFL in Europe is the plan, right? Henderson State cheerleaders are cheering away. They're the ones in red. We did not bring our cheerleaders because we chose to bring a couple of 3 or 4 more players. We took 53, and I think they took, 45 or something so they could bring their cheerleaders. We didn't bring our cheerleaders. So the A&I coaches' wives dressed up as cheerleaders, and it's pretty hilarious because they're in their 40s, 45 years old, and they've already had their babies, and they look markedly different than the Henderson State cheerleaders because they're middle-aged, right? Pretty cool, though, that they did it. They shameless, if you want to know the truth about it. Oh, so let me tell you about Sporty Carpenter, sly little dog that he is. The whole plan on this program, this whole tour, was to have an exhibition game, right? That means go half speed, show the fans how it works, walk through some plays, and just take it easy. We were supposed to exhibit, not try to win a game. Well, first series out of the box, they came full speed. So Coach Stanky said, sick them. So we kicked their butt. Tony Fritsch, the Dallas Cowboy place kicker, was from Austria. So obviously in the off season, the summer, he's home in Austria, right? So they recruited him to promote this new league, this Intercontinental Football League is what they called it. And we, again, were the first American football players to introduce American football as opposed to soccer on the European continent. Ultimately, it went on to be the NFL in Europe, which is a farm system. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, Tony Fritsch, spokesman, international celebrity at that time. David Marquez, good friend of mine. He's number 64. He is one of my best friends, actually. We were suite mates. He's from Houston. Great guy. He ended up being exceptionally successful. He was kind of like a Disdar. But he got in the business of redeveloping existing office buildings in downtown San Antonio, old ones, remodel them, refurbish them, turn them into high-rise lofts. He did 34 $30 million deals over his career. Do the numbers. 34 $30 million deals. I would say the boy did okay. David Marquez. Unfortunately, he passed away from pancreatic cancer. Normally takes people in 6 months. Pancreatic cancer will kill you. He lasted 2.5 years. He fought it. 2 days before he died, I was at his side praying with him and staying with him. And I knew he was getting close, and I called his wife 2 days later and asked her if I could come see him, and she said, well, he really had a rough night last night. Why don't you push it till tomorrow? Because he's an hour and 15 minutes away from the ranch. Well, we pushed it till tomorrow, and he didn't make it till tomorrow. He passed away that night. So good friend of mine, great guy, but he was a believer, so I'll see him in heaven someday. And I knew he had a Hispanic background. He talked about his grandfather and his dad coming from Mexico and that kind of thing. But in my mind, he was just one of the guys. I didn't think of him as a minority or a Mexican. He was just my friend, right? So one day I said, wait a minute, dude. Are you telling me you're a real Mexican? He said, what other kind of Mexican is there? I'm a real Mexican, damn it. But I didn't see it that way. I was colorblind. He was my buddy, right? I just thought he was one of the guys. So we laughed and high-fived over that, and he told that story over and over again for 40 years until he passed away. Koviak, who was one of the backfield coaches, and I may have to help you identify exactly who he is when we get to that point. Sure. A good story about Coach Koviak, he was an All-American quarterback for A&I during his playing days, and he stayed on, got his master's, and became a coach. We were walking across campus one day, me and 3 or 4 other freshmen, and we didn't know, we were so green we didn't even know we were green. I mean, it was like our first 2 weeks of school. And we had a good guy named Stephen Glick, and I'll point him out in a minute. A real loudmouth, great guy, but just gregarious. He'd say anything to anybody, didn't know it was even rude. He'd just say it, blurt it out. So we're walking along, and Glick was known as the loudmouth on the team. He had his head shaved back in the day when that wasn't even cool. Everybody else wore long hair. He shaved his head like Kojak on TV. If you don't know who Kojak is, look him up. Okay. He was an American actor, detective, and anyway, so we nicknamed Glick Kojak. And so you could get a picture of Kojak off the internet and put Glick beside him and look just like him. So Glick's running his mouth as usual, just diarrhea of the mouth, loud too, not whispering, loud. Everybody can hear him. There's about 6 of us walking the campus. And he proceeds to give us a complete rundown on his take on the coaches and who he liked and he didn't like. Okay? And he's just ragging them. I mean, cussing them like dog manure about how bad they are and all that kind of stuff. Just on and on and on and on as we walk to campus, right? Class from our athletic dorm. And there's a lot of people around. Everybody's going to class, right? So you're going to see 3 people in front of you, 5 behind you, and 3 beside you, that kind of thing. And he's just running his mouth. It's like, Glick, shut the F up, dude. That's what everybody's thinking, but it's just his personality, right? So he lists all the coaches and all their flaws, and he gets down to one guy, and he goes, but Coach Koviak, he's a cool dude. I like him. Well, at that, the 4 girls in front of us stopped. One of them turned and said, I'm glad you like Coach Koviak. He's my husband. It was his wife going to class. So after he dog cussed all the other coaches on the team, he said one good thing about the coach whose wife was walking right in front of him listening to the whole thing. Only Glick could pull that off. And obviously she kept her counsel because he didn't get in trouble over it. She didn't go blab, which is pretty cool. Kudos to her. But only Glick would do something that stupid. Just no couth, no muffler, no nothing, just wide open. Hatchet Head, that was his nickname. He was a street urchin from Houston that crawled out of the gutter and became a football player. Played several years in the NFL. He's number 34, by the way. He almost got us all impounded into the Berlin jail because he shoplifted behind the Iron Curtain in 1976. Impounded the entire bus caravan of 2 teams, 2 double-decker buses per team, which was 2 buses each. They impounded us and searched every bag until they found it. He was on my bus. They searched my bag. I was about halfway back. He was about 3/4 of the way back. And when they got close to him, they had bayonets on their guns. These people were serious. East German guards. He stood up and said, okay, I did it. I admit it. They jerked him off the bus like he deserved it, which he did. And took about 2 hours to settle it. They had to bring in the U.S. Diplomatic Corps and the American Embassy to keep us all from going to jail because that sticky-fingered idiot couldn't leave things in place. And the bad part about it was a Cupid doll or something nonsense, like a trinket that he shoplifted. Actually, his name was Something Green was his last name. Green with envy for what he did. He played a number of years in the NFL. Great athlete, but nothing between his ears. No ethics, no morals, no home training, no nothing. But a heck of a ball player. He'd knock your lights out. He played cornerback. You'll see a lot of video of number 34 making the tackle. He did what he did, but he also got us in a lot of trouble almost, or did. Stanky, Pete Murray's the offensive coordinator. Coach Stanky's the head coach. Coach Jonas is the defensive coordinator. Coach Jonas is the only one still alive. He's 84 now, and he still hosts the Super Bowl party every year, and we go to his house. And it's Billy John, again, number 78. I've already talked about him. His mother sent him back after he left training camp. His wife lost his wife to breast cancer recently, and we all rallied around him and hung tight at 45 years ago. It's what they do in Javelina Nation. We go to funerals, and we support each other still 45 years later because we're blood brothers. Just like military guys that are blood brothers from war. We went to metaphorical war together, not literally. They weren't shooting bullets, but we conquered some stuff together as teammates, right? At 9.05 to 9.08, Larry Collins, number 23, LC. There's only one LC in the world. He played 3 or 4 years in the NFL. Recently, he was inducted in the San Antonio Hall of Fame, and all of us showed up. A whole bunch of us, about 150 of us, with wives and cousins and hanger-on and all that. There's only 53 on the team. There's about 150 of us at dinner. He bought dinner for the entire group at a restaurant to thank us for coming to support him being inducted to his high school Hall of Fame. In addition to this dude's a class act. He went around, and they videotaped it. He went around and stood behind each person that his teammate and told a story about how he appreciated us and what we did for him to make him a better athlete. He's the one that went to the NFL, not all of us. I mean, several did, but none of us. But he, for instance, came and stood behind me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, Kenny G was left tackle. He closed the back door. He kept people from hitting the quarterback. You know, that's the pass rush coming from the blind side, called closing the back door. My job is close the back door, keep that defensive end from making a sack. And he made that sound like, you know, they just made a mistake not putting me in the NFL. That's how he just gave everybody else the honor when, in fact, he was the one being honored. That's servant leadership. It's a class act, and I'll never forget it. And he did that in front of 150 people in a restaurant that he picked up the tab. I bet you it was several $1,000s for dinner.